Lucid dreaming. I've always had very vivid and intense dreams. I lucid dream a lot. It's really cool most of the time. I make it a habit throughout the day to look at my hands and count my fingers. Usually in dreams, I'll have an extra digit or something, so I know I'm dreaming if my hands are different. My boyfriend and I were at his best friend's house having a few drinks. We stayed the night there and passed out on the couches. I went into lucid dreaming, except I was still in their living room. My boyfriend was on the other couch, Mythbusters was on the TV, and there was an older lady standing in the doorway to the living room and staring at me. Late 60s or early 70s maybe. I stared back, and I finally asked her what she was doing. She said, "I was just checking on everyone." I asked her if she could not watch me sleep because I found it creepy. She said, "Sure, I'm gonna go check on Skylar." Skylar is their autistic 2-year-old. She walked down the hallway, and then I woke up to Skylar's crying. His mom went to check on him and got him laid back down. I fell back asleep and went back into the dream. It was the same. I was still in the living room, and the old lady was back. She said, "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to wake him up. I stepped on that doll in his floor and it started talking." I told her that it was fine, and then she wandered down the hall again. The next morning, I went into Skylar's room to see if there was such a doll. In the floor, there was a large action figure with buttons on its chest, and it would say certain phrases. At Skylar's birthday party, I met his grandmother, and she looked a lot like the woman in my dream, just younger. I think it was one of his dad's relatives that had passed away. His dad was a cool friend, but not a good family man. He had serious bipolar, and now they're actually divorced with a protection order against him. His mother and other relatives have never known how to deal with him. I think one of them was watching out for them. Incubus or lucid dream? Just to start this out, I'm a very skeptical girl. Over time, I've come to look at the world with more logical eyes. When it comes to ghosts, demons, or any of that paranormal stuff, I just shrug it off and think, well, until it happens to me, I'm not going to believe it. I mean, it's just so easy to lie about that stuff, right? Especially on the internet, and since I've never before seen it with my own eyes, it must be fake. Right? Well, today, I'm left confused and gonna share my experience, if one would come to call it that. I'm not sure what to make of it. Was it a dream or was it something else? I'm not sure, and I'm hoping by sharing my experience here, I can find others who can relate, and I can gain some understanding of it. Let me begin by saying that within the past few days, I've grown increasingly interested in incubi for what seemed to be no apparent reason. I found myself scouring the internet for all the folklore pertaining to these myths and mildly fantasizing about them. Of course, I kept saying, I'll only believe it if it happens to me, which it won't. But did it happen today? The day started out like any normal day. I woke up, but I was extremely tired, not feeling like doing much. I went over to my ex's house to play video games and just lay around. Well, after a few hours of playing video games, we decided that we were going to lie down and take a nap. He slept on the outside of the bed, I slept on the inside next to the wall. I remember clearly that I was facing the wall as I closed my eyes to get ready to fall asleep. However, I remember opening my eyes, I was still on my side, but now I was sort of on my stomach. I looked towards my ex to find that he was asleep. Not wanting to disturb him, I closed my eyes and thought about going back to sleep. But then, things started to get strange. I felt something there, like it was behind me. It was during this time that my body started to feel stiff and I could barely move. My head started to feel foggy, like I just took some pain meds or something. It was an eerie, calm sense of peace that made me feel on edge. I couldn't speak either. All I could do was stare at the wall, trying my hardest to look out the corner of my eye, but it was to no avail. the being, or whatever it was, got on top of me. It was gentle in the way it acted, and talked to me in a calm voice, although I could not understand what it was saying. My head felt too foggy to try to concentrate on anything. It, or maybe I should call it he, since it had a male's voice, felt sort of heavy on top of me, but I was still able to breathe normally. It talked to me and touched my hair for a few minutes before I felt something insert itself into me. All I can remember is my body being moved up and down in that rhythmic motion, my head hitting the wall. I remember feeling a sense of him not wanting to stop, but also a sense of confusion. It lasted for such a long time, and I remember drifting in and out of consciousness the whole time. Then, as soon as it had happened, it ended. I think he spoke again, I'm not sure. By that time, my head felt so foggy, all I wanted to do was fall asleep. But then my eyes opened once again. I was lying on my other side, my back facing the wall now. I was so confused by that point. All I could think about was that experience, and I'm still thinking about it. I'm so confused as to what happened. Was I asleep? If so, why was the dream so lucid? I'm not one to dream those type of dreams, so I'm very on edge. It was only after then that I was reminded of when I was 12. I distinctly remember these types of dreams happening to me repeatedly over some period of time, but then they stopped. During all of them, I was always on my stomach, with the being talking to me in a gentle way. Only once do I remember being on my back during the experience, only to see nothing there. Could it be the same being? Who knows? I feel like a fool to write such things. I try to be as logical as possible, but it seems like I am left thinking that this was indeed something unworldly. You see, I'm not one to have wet dreams, so I doubt it could have been that. And I doubt it was because I've been looking so much about Incubus because the dream just felt so lucid and real. I don't know. Maybe it was nothing after all. All I know now is that I'm so very confused. I wonder if it'll happen again. Lucid dreams, alien abduction, or something more evil. This is quite a long story, but I hope someone will hear me out as I'm very confused. It all started about a year ago when I began experimenting with lucid dreaming. I remember what seemed like my first out-of-body experience, as I woke up startled thinking it really had happened. I confirmed some parts of my dreams to have actually taken place in a similar manner miles away with my mom. Time difference is -3 hours. Could I have actually been there with her as I dreamt? Towards the end of this dream, I saw myself dreaming, although I was asleep in my bed at my parents' house. I remember thinking in my head that I was undergoing an out-of-body experience as I watched my sleeping body. Suddenly, my body awoke to find bloodstains all over the sheets. I saw myself lift up my shirt and saw several claw marks across my stomach and 2 perpendicular marks across my chest that resembled the sign of the cross. I screamed for my mom and awoke in real life to myself actually screaming. I was afraid. I had to check my stomach and chest to make sure I was dreaming. I stopped attempting to have out-of-body experiences for some time after this. However, time and time again, I would involuntarily achieve this level of dreaming. Another very remarkable dream I had once left me confused for weeks, and I'd even consider that I was drugged or abducted by aliens. I was spending the night at a friend's and fell asleep on the couch. As soon as I began to drift off, I began hearing 2 of my friends' voices in my head as they were in the room with me. I awoke several times and the voices would stop, and they were nowhere near me. I began to wonder if I was projecting myself into their room as I slept. They were carrying on a conversation about me. The conversation then took a turn for the worse, and they began to speak about me in vulgar terms. Example, I was called an evil witch. At this point, I felt like I was out of my body. I couldn't move or wake up even though I really wanted to. It was like I couldn't get back into my body. Except for every now and then, I would wake up and realize I was dreaming. As soon as I fell back asleep, the voices would begin. The voices continued, and now it was as if they were observing my sleeping positions, which was very awkward for me, but it was like I couldn't help it. At one point, they said something funny and I could hear myself laughing and feel myself smile. They replied to this reaction, "Look, she's smiling, as if she can hear our conversation," or something along those lines. I tried pulling my blanket over my head to stop the voices. It would seem as if I did, or maybe my astral body was trying to. But as I've said, I kept going into a waking state every now and then, and I would notice that my blanket would never stay over my head. It was as if some invisible force was pulling it off each time I tried. Then I felt a presence in the room, and the voices stopped. I imagined some kind of being walking towards me. It was relatively short because I felt like it was on the same level as my head, and I was sleeping on the couch. I could hear this sort of computerized growling right next to me, coming from this being. And at this point I felt fear, but I couldn't wake myself up or move my legs or arms. That was the last thing I remembered about being in that room. When I awoke, I had vivid memories of what happened thereafter. I could see 3 people in lab coats studying my body behind a large glass window. They were holding clipboards and discussing certain information about me. For example, I can remember being told about my past lives. I was a descendant from the city of Atlantis, a dog, and a girl named Donna. I was shown a glimpse of the future because this vision soon came true weeks later. It regarded a friend of mine and my current boyfriend at the time. And lastly, I can remember out of the darkness, a purple alien face sprang out at me, and I was seriously startled. I asked my friends if they've ever had any weird dreams the next morning. Maybe I did have an out-of-body experience, that I could hear their conversations in another room, or even their thoughts as they slept. But they slept fine. I began thinking maybe I was drugged, as I couldn't move my body at one point. And as I began to dig deeper, I even considered an alien abduction. Anyways, soon after this dream, strange things began occurring in my life. I felt as if I was more in tune with my psychic abilities. I could sense people's feelings more often, and I could sense when they were lying. During altered states, such as drinking or smoking cannabis with a group of people, I could zone out on what conversations they were really having, or hear their thoughts or what I believed to be their thoughts. I felt telepathic many times, especially with dogs, cats, and babies. I would often get this voice in my head directing me, and would always end up being the right direction. When I needed the answer to a question, I would think of all the possibilities in my head and just know the right answer. I felt as if I was being watched, and synchronicity were frequent. What could be possible explanations to these occurrences? Am I simply going crazy? Must I add, I've always been interested in the real destiny of our souls and heaven and earth. I understand the significance of the energy that exists in each and every one of us. In other words, I consider myself a very spiritual person. Can someone please help?